Welcome to this training lesson on starting up the Hornet. In some missions, you will find yourself in a cold and dark Hornet that you will need to bring to life. While this can be a rather long process as described in the manual, you can also enable the auto start function. However, for this lesson, we'll review the full startup procedure. Press spacebar when you are ready to get started. The first thing we need to do is enable the two batteries. This will allow operation of the canopy and power the engine igniters. You'll also notice that the integrated fuel and engine indicator, or IFE, in the lower left portion of the instrument panel will have power. Move the battery switch to the up or on position with a right mouse button click. The Hornet has two fire detection circuits, A and B, that test for fire in the engines, auxiliary power unit, and bleed air system. Before we go into detail on that though, check that the hydraulic brake pressure gauge for the wheel brakes shows at least 3000 psi. Confirm this by looking at the gauge, which is located to the left and up from the highlighted fire test switch. Okay, now put the spring-loaded fire test switch in the up test A position, and keep holding it up to test the A circuits. To do this, place the mouse over the fire test switch and hold down the right mouse button. Keep holding the mouse button down and do not release it until it runs through all the fire test audio warnings. In addition to the audio warnings, also note the fire test warning lights on the upper left and right portions of the instrument panel. When it's done, press spacebar.
Engine fire left. Engine fire left. Engine fire left. Engine fire left. Engine right fire. Engine right fire. APU fire. APU fire. Bleed air left. Bleed air left. Bleed air right. Bleed air right.
We will now do the same thing for the B circuit. After waiting 10 seconds, place the mouse over the fire test switch and hold down the left mouse button to move the switch in the down test B position. Keep holding it down and then release it once all the fire warning audio messages have been played. Well done. Press spacebar.
Engine fire left. Engine fire left. Engine fire right. Engine fire right. APU fire. APU fire. Bleed air left. Bleed air left. Bleed air right. Bleed air right.
Good job. Note that in the top left portion of the IFE, you can see the RPM and temp of both the left and right engines. These will be important for when we start the engines. We will now turn on the auxiliary power unit, or APU. This is a small, self-contained engine that augments the bleed air system and will start turning the engines for engine starts. Place the APU control switch in the up or on position with the left mouse button click. Once the green light next to the APU switch comes on, move the engine crank switch to its right position. marked by the R, with a right mouse button click. This will allow the APU to power the Air Turbine Starter, or ATS, which in turn allows the Aircraft Mounted Accessory Drive, or AMRAAM, to start turning the fan blades within the right engine. Once the right engine RPM has reached 20%, as indicated on the IFE, move the right throttle from off to idle by pressing right shift home. This in turn will introduce fuel into the engine combustion chamber and start the igniters. Once the right engine RPM has reached 60%, the right engine start cycle is complete and the right generator is automatically engaged. Once at 60%, press spacebar.
Roll left. Flight control.
When we conducted the tests of the A and B fire test circuits, we also closed the bleed air shutoff valves. We need to reopen these by rotating the bleed air knob clockwise 360 degrees, from norm to norm. Do this by right mouse button clicking on the outer portion of the knob. When done, press spacebar. With the right engine running and generator power on, place the left and right digital display indicators, or DDIs, to the day position using right mouse button clicks on both brightness selector knobs. Next, rotate the HUD symbology brightness control knob clockwise by placing your mouse over it and rotating your mouse wheel forward. Once you see video displayed on the left and right DDIs and HUD, press spacebar. In the lower center of the instrument panel is the multi-purpose color display, or MPCD. Rotate the power and brightness control knob to the full bright setting by placing your mouse over the knob and rotating your mouse wheel forward. It will take a few moments to power on. Press spacebar once you see video displayed on the MPCD. On the left DDI, press the menu push button to bring up the support page. The support page has several sub-pages like the checklist, engine, fuel, ADI, and HSI. For now, though, press the FCS push button to select the flight control system page. The FCS page shows the status of the control surfaces and any detected FCS errors. The X's indicate detected errors, but we will address those once the left engine is started. You should not see any to, R, or FADEC caution messages along the bottom of the left DDI. Note that by default, you will not have the built-in test or bit page on the right DDI. We'll come back to this. During this lesson and future lessons, you will often see and hear the master caution. This is the large yellow labeled button on the instrument panel that will light when any caution condition is triggered. There will also be an accompanying deedle sound to draw your attention. Press this button or click on it to acknowledge the caution and extinguish the light. Press the master caution again to restack the caution and advisory notices along the bottom of the left DDI. Cautions will be along the top and advisories in smaller text along the bottom. If the left DDI is not on, then the caution and advisories will be displayed on another display. By default though, they will be on the left DDI. The Hornet comes equipped with an inertial navigation system, or INS. Use right mouse clicks to set the INS switch, located on the sensor panel to the ground position. This will start an INS ground alignment. Now it is time to crank the left engine. Go ahead and move the engine crank switch to its left position, labeled L, by left mouse clicking it. Once the left engine is at 20% RPM, as indicated on the iFeed, move the left throttle from off to idle by pressing right Alt Home. This will add fuel to the engine and start the igniters. When the left engine is at 60% RPM, press spacebar to continue. On the FCS page, we have quite a few X's indicating abnormal FCS readings. To clear these, press and hold the FCS reset button. Located in the back of the left console is the panel for the onboard oxygen generation system, or OBOG. Go ahead and set the OBOG switch to its up-on position. To the left of the INS switch is the radar switch. Set this switch to the operate position using your right mouse button. Don't worry, the radar will be in silent mode. You won't microwave the ground crew. Our next step will be to run a bit on the flight control system, or FCS. Before doing so, set the flaps to the up auto position with the F key, or 2 right mouse button clicks on the flap switch. We'll now run a bit of the flight control system. This moves the control surfaces to their limits to test for any software or mechanical errors. First, select the FCS bit page from the bit page on the right DDI. To run the FCS bit, we'll need to activate 2 controllers at the same time. While holding up on the FCS bit switch on the right wall, press the FCS push button on the right DDI. Upon doing so, you'll see the controls being cycled on both the FCS DDI page, and if you look outside the cockpit, you can watch the wing and tail control surfaces moving. Once the FCS bit is complete, marked by the beep tone, place the flap switch in the center or half position with the left mouse button click on the switch. Takeoff is done with flaps set to half. Once we are airborne, we'll move them to auto. For takeoff, we will want our stabs trimmed for 12 degrees. To set this, press and hold down the takeoff trim button. Upon doing so, you will also notice that the stab values on the FCS page will change to 12. The leading edge flaps, trailing edge flaps, and rudder should all have values of 30 degrees. You should also have no X's on the FCS page. Uncage the backup ADI by placing your mouse over the SAI cage knob and rotating the mouse wheel aft until the red flag is stowed. Close the canopy by holding the canopy control switch in the down, close position until the canopy is closed. Do this by pressing the key combination or placing the mouse over the switch and holding down the left mouse button. Once the canopy is closed, press spacebar to continue. At this point, the INS has been aligned as indicated on the MPCD HSI page. Move the INS switch from ground to nav with one right mouse button click on the switch. Prior to taxi, press the menu push button on the left DDI to go to the TAC or Tactical page. On the TAC page, you have access to sub-pages like the store's management system, attack radar, HUD, and electronic warfare pages. On the left DDI TAC page, select the HUD push button to display a mirror of the HUD on the DDI. This can be useful when head down or in case of HUD failure. Let's now set up the right DDI. Press the menu push button on the right DDI to bring up the tactical page. Press the menu push button again to bring up the support page. Now on the support page, press the FCS push button. We will want the HUD on the left DDI and the FCS page on the right DDI when we taxi and take off. The parking brake system is operated with the yellow and black parking brake handle. The handle is currently in the park position, indicated by the fact that the park label is visible to the pilot. Release the parking brake now by rotating the handle 45 degrees counterclockwise from the extended position. This can be achieved by left mouse button clicking the handle or pressing the right Alt-P key. This will release the lock and allow the handle to return to the horizontal stowed position, where the emerge label is visible to the pilot. This concludes the current lesson on starting up the Hornet. As mentioned earlier though, there is also an option for automatically starting up the Hornet by pressing the left Windows Home key. You can end the lesson now by pressing the Escape key. In this lesson, we are starting in an up and running Hornet, and we will learn how to taxi to the runway and take off. Before we taxi though, let's set up a few more items that we did not cover in the cold start lesson. Press spacebar when ready. During low-light operations like this evening, place the landing and taxi light switch in the up-on position. Now, set up your position, formation, and strobe lights as you desire. The formation lights, or slime lights, are low-intensity green lights that aid in close-in formation flying. Position lights are red and green lights that mark the left and right sides of the aircraft, and the strobe are two flashing red lights on the tail. When done, press spacebar. Time to set up your internal lights. The instrument dial controls instrument panel lighting. The console dial controls the lighting on the left and right consoles. The flood dial illuminates the forward section of the cockpit, and the chart dial controls lighting of your lap area. The lights test switch will test all cockpit warning and caution lights. The warn caution dial allows you to adjust the illumination of those lights. The mode switch allows you to select default internal lighting for day, night, and night vision goggle use. Experiment with these and press spacebar when ready to move on. On the altimeter, rotate the pressure setting knob with the mouse wheel to set an airfield pressure elevation of 29.90 atmospheric pressure. Press spacebar when it's set. To steer the Hornet when taxiing, we will use the nose wheel steering, or NWS, by pressing the S key, or the NWS button on the control stick. When engaged, as indicated by the NWS indication on the bottom right portion of the HUD, rudder inputs will steer the aircraft left and right. When the NWS button is held down, nose wheel steering high, or NWS high, is enabled and allows a tighter turn radius. This is quite helpful on a crowded carrier deck. Press spacebar to continue. To get rolling, slowly increase the throttles until you have forward movement, but do not exceed 75% engine RPM. Press Z to steer left and X to steer right. Taxi forward to the runway directly ahead. Keep taxiing forward and practice both normal NWS and NWS high steering. Come to a halt just short of entering the runway by using the toe brakes at the top of the rudder pedals. On the right DDI, confirm that the stab position is set to 12 for both stabilators. While holding down the wheel brakes, increase engine RPM to 80% and check that the temps on the IFE do not exceed 800 degrees Celsius. In a Hornet, you always take off an afterburner. Release the brakes and push the throttles all the way forward to full afterburner. As you roll down the runway, keep aligned down the middle with very small rudder inputs. Keep a small amount of backstick and the Hornet will automatically rotate and fly off the runway. Raise the landing gear by moving the landing gear control handle in the up position. Then, raise the flaps by setting the flap switch to the up auto position. Congratulations! You have just taken off in a Hornet! You can end the lesson now by pressing the escape key. A key part of any mission is the ability to navigate to and from the target. Two such tools the Hornet provides are automatic direction finding, or ADF, and tactical air navigation, or TACAN. ADF uses VOR stations located throughout the maps to get bearing-only information to them, and TACAN stations are co-located with many airfields, aircraft carriers, and some aerial refuelers. TACAN can provide both bearing and range, or just one of them depending on the source and TACAN mode used. In this lesson, we will discuss how to select ADF and TACAN navigation, and the steering information provided. I currently have the lesson paused as we first discuss a few items. Press spacebar to continue. For this lesson, we will be using an ADF example and then TACAN to navigate back to our home training base at Kobuleti. Let's start with the simpler ADF. To start, let's first select the Horizontal Situation Indicator, or HSI, for the left DDI. Press the menu Time push button on the left DDI to bring us to the tactical page. Note that this button will indicate menu when on the ground, but will show time when airborne. Let's press the same push button again to bring us to the support page. Now on the support page, press the HSI push button. The HSI is your primary navigation page that will display TACAN, Waypoint, and ADF navigation data. In the center of the HSI is an aircraft symbol that represents your position from a top-down vantage. Your true airspeed is to the left of the symbol and ground speed to the right. Centered and around the aircraft symbol is a compass rose, and on the very top is a louver line that indicates your heading in regards to the compass rose. Along the top of the HSI is the SCL, or Scale, push button. Consecutive presses of this push button will cycle through the scale range options of the HSI. Press spacebar to continue. An ADF is assigned to a specific frequency, which can also be stored as a preset on one of the two radios. In this case, we have the VOR ADF near Kataisi Airfield preset as Channel 2 on Radio 1. Right now, Radio 1 is set to Channel 1, as you can see in the Channel Select window for Radio 1. To select a new channel preset, place your mouse over the Radio 1 select dial and rotate the mouse wheel forward until 2 is displayed. When you do, you will soon hear the characteristic ADF identification code for that VOR station. Press spacebar to continue. To display the bearing to the VOR station on the HSI, we need to set the UFC ADF function select switch to radio 1. To do this, right mouse button click on the switch. With that done, you will now note a small circle along the outside of the compass rose at the 1 o'clock position. This is your bearing to the ADF signal. There is no range information though. As you can see, ADF is quite simple. Let's move on to TACAN. Press spacebar when ready. In order to display all TACAN information on the HSI and HUD, press the TCN or TACAN push button on the HSI. Upon doing so, it will be boxed. Now we need to turn on the TACAN and set the code of the desired station. Press the TACAN button on the UFC. With the TACAN now selected on the UFC, we have three choices in the option select windows. TR is transmit receive and will provide both bearing and range guidance. RCV is for receive and will just provide bearing to the station. And AA is for air to air and will provide either bearing and range or just range depending on the aircraft. By default, we have TR selected, which is fine. The lower two option select windows allow you to select either an X or Y TACAN channel. For example, 67X. Now let's turn on the TACAN by pressing the on-off button on the UFC. On the scratch pad, we now see that the TACAN is on and a default value of 1. Select Clear on the UFC keypad to remove this. We will navigate to the TACAN station at Kobuleti Airfield, which has the TACAN code of 67X. Enter 67 on the UFC keypad and then press the Enter button on the UFC. After entering 67X and pressing Enter, press spacebar. With the TACAN station now selected, we have some new information on the HUD and HSI. On the right side of the HUD, we have the range to the station in nautical miles and the 3-digit code for the station to the right of the distance value. At the top of the HUD, along the heading tape, we have a steering bar that indicates the heading to the TACAN station. On the HSI, we have much more information. In the top left corner of the HSI, we have a data block with 3 rows. The top row is bearing, distance. The second row is time to go in minutes and seconds. And the bottom row is the station ID. On the outside of the compass rose is an inverted triangle with a T in the center. This indicates your heading to the station. There is a corresponding tail on the other side of the compass rose. Between the aircraft symbol and the T symbol is a 3-pronged symbol that represents the selected TACAN station. Press spacebar to continue. When the TACAN station has been selected, you can use the course set switch labeled CRS on the top right corner of the MPCD to set a course line that is centered on the selected station. Left click rotates the course line counterclockwise and a right mouse click moves it clockwise. When a course has been set, the course line will be displayed on the HSI and on the HUD, with dots to represent 4 and 8 degrees of course offset. Press spacebar to continue. When a TACAN beacon is selected, you will also hear the coded ID. You can adjust the volume of this with the TACAN volume control knob labeled TCN on the volume panel. Press spacebar to continue. You can view airfield TACAN beacon channels by going to the F10 map, clicking on an airfield, and then reading the data of the airfield. This concludes our look at the HSI, ADF, and TACAN. When you are ready, press spacebar to unpause this lesson and practice navigating using the ADF and TACAN. While TACAN navigation is a great tool to get back to your airfield or carrier, many times you will need the ability to set arbitrary navigation points. This is where waypoint navigation comes in. The Hornet allows you to have 3 sequences of waypoints that you could use to mark anything from a turn point, a target, or to a threat location. Waypoints can be created in both the mission editor and while in the Hornet cockpit. For this lesson though, we will focus on a waypoint sequence already created. I currently have the lesson paused. Press spacebar to continue. Let's first set the left DDI to the HSI page. Press the time push button. We are now on the tactical page, so a press of the time push button again will bring us to the support page. Now on the support page, select the HSI push button. This will display the horizontal situation indicator. Much of this will look familiar from the TACAN lesson. Instead of pressing the TCN push button though, press the waypoint push button this time. This will box waypoint and allow display of more waypoint navigation information on the HSI and HUD. We are currently at waypoint 0, as indicated on the right side of the HUD and between the up and down arrows along the right side of the left DDI. Press the up arrow to select the next waypoint, waypoint 1. With waypoint 1 selected, note the distance to the waypoint and the waypoint number is displayed on the right side of the HUD, and a steering bar to the waypoint is along the heading tape. On the HSI, you can now better see the waypoint marker that appears as a small circle with a dot in the center. By pressing the Sec1 push button, it will box it and display dashed, connecting lines between the waypoints in the selected sequence. In the top right portion of the HSI, data of the selected waypoints is shown. The top row is the bearing and distance to the waypoint, and below is the hours, minutes, seconds to the waypoint. Inscribed inside the compass rows is a triangle that indicates the heading to the selected waypoint, with a corresponding tail opposite of it. Press spacebar to continue. As with TACAN, you can also set a course line through the selected waypoint. This can be useful by placing a waypoint on a runway and using the course line for a direct approach, or as a reference for the downwind leg of an overhead landing pattern. Press spacebar to continue. By selecting the Auto Waypoint Sequence option, the navigation system will automatically select the next waypoint in sequence as each waypoint is reached. This avoids having to manually select the next waypoint while navigating a sequence. When you are ready, I will unpause the lesson and allow you to navigate the waypoint sequence. Ahead of you is a sequence of waypoints along a low-altitude flight plan. Try to fly through each gate in sequence. Press spacebar to unpause the lesson. To more easily fly this sequence, you may wish to adjust the HSI scale. You can use this in conjunction with the next waypoint distance and steering cue on the HUD to best align yourself to intercept the next gate. At any point you can end this lesson by pressing the escape key.
Roll right!
In previous lessons, we learned how to take off and navigate, but what goes up must come down. In this lesson, we'll go over the basics of landing a Hornet at an airfield in visual flight rules conditions using a straight-in approach. This will also be useful for the later instrument flight rules landing lesson. I currently have the lesson paused as I want to first outline the basics of an airfield VFR straight-in approach. Before flying this lesson, please make sure you are familiar with the HUD symbology as described in the manual and first lesson. Press spacebar to continue. You'll start the approach 11 miles out at 3,000 feet barometric and 260 knots on approach to runway 07 at Coboletti. Once at 5 miles, you will be at 1,500 feet, and this will place you on a 3-degree glide path to the runway. To measure your glide path angle, reference your velocity vector on the HUD in relation to the pitch ladder. A 3-degree flight path is standard for a Hornet landing. For a straight-in approach, we will keep the HUD showing barometric altitude. This will also be true for IFR landings. Press spacebar to continue. After the lesson is unpaused, reduce your throttle to idle and fly through the gates ahead. Once your airspeed is below 250 knots, lower the landing gear by moving the landing gear control handle down. Do this by left-clicking the handle or by pressing the G key. Also lower the flaps to fold down by moving the flap switch in the down fold position, either by left-clicking on the switch twice or pressing left control F. Once the gear and flaps are down, keep flying through the gates and get the aircraft to an on-speed angle of attack. This is the proper AOA that will achieve the correct hook angle to catch the target wire of the carrier. You will want an angle of attack of 8.1 degrees, which will place the velocity vector on the HUD in the center of the E bracket. Additionally, your angle of attack target of 8.1 degrees is indicated by the AOA indexer lights to the left of the HUD frame. When at the on-speed AOA, the center yellow circle will be illuminated. Use the throttle to adjust your glide path and pitch trim to adjust AOA when the flaps are down. Use the first part of this flight to practice stabilized on-speed flight. Press spacebar to continue. When you're ready, press spacebar and I will unpause the lesson. Being below 250 knots, go ahead and lower your landing gear and drop the flaps to full. Reduce your airspeed by setting the throttles to idle. You may also wish to extend your speed brake by using the speed brake switch on the right throttle grip or by pressing left shift B to get slower more quickly. Note the SPD BRK light on the instrument panel when the speed brake is extended. As you slow below 140 knots, retract the speed brake by using the speed brake switch or pressing left control B. Adjust the throttle and stick trim to maintain 8.1 degrees of angle of attack. Velocity vector inside the E bracket. At this point, you should be on speed with an angle of attack of 8.1 degrees, indicated by the velocity vector in the center of the E bracket on the HUD. Use throttle input to adjust your glide path such that the E bracket is positioned over the runway threshold. Use pitch trim to keep on-speed AOA. You should now be on a 3-degree glide path down the runway. Maintain on-speed AOA, and your glide path should be aligned with the runway threshold. Maintain on-speed AOA and fly the aircraft onto the runway with a vertical velocity of no more than 750 feet per minute, as displayed over the HUD altitude indication. Do not flare. Once the nose wheel comes down, use the rudder to keep the aircraft centered down the runway, and use the wheel brakes to bring her to a halt. Well done. You can end the lesson now by pressing the escape key. Welcome to this training lesson on use of the Hornet's M61A2 20mm cannon against ground targets. Mounted in the nose of the aircraft, it can be loaded with up to 578 rounds and has a firing rate of either 4,000 rounds or 6,000 rounds per minute. When you need precise fire against unarmed or lightly armed targets, the gun can be a great choice. I currently have the lesson paused so we can talk about the gun system in AG use. Press spacebar to continue. Confirm that the master arm switch is already set to arm, and set the master mode to AG for air to ground, or press 2. On the left DDI, we see that we have 578 rounds loaded, master arm switch is set to arm, and that we have a clean aircraft. Next to push button 11, we have the AG gun selection. Go ahead and press it. We are now looking at the AG gun format page on the left DDI. On this page, we can select the gun mode, round type selection, rate of fire, and UFC entry for manual mode. Along the left side of the page, we see that we have mode options of continuously computed impact point, or CCIP, and manual, or man mode. CCIP is boxed, indicated it is the active mode. We'll come back to this soon. Below the mode selection on push buttons 1 and 2 are selections for either M50 or PBU-28 gun rounds. The selection here should match what was selected for the aircraft in the mission editor. You can keep this as is. Along the bottom left of the page are selections for a high rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute or a low rate of fire of 4,000 rounds per minute. Note that gun is boxed with a ready indication in the top right portion of the page. meaning the gun will fire when you pull the trigger. Press spacebar to continue. Let's shift our look to the HUD now, which is in AG Gun CCIP mode. The most important element of the AG Gun HUD is the CCIP gun reticle near the center of the HUD. When showing valid range, it acts as a death dot. You simply fly to place the pipper over the target and fire when the in RNG cue is displayed. Surrounding the pipper dot is a 50mm reticle composed of tick marks, each representing 1,000 feet of slant range. As you get closer to the target, a range tape will unwind counterclockwise around the reticle from 23,000 feet to 0 feet. Inscribed inside the reticle will be a line that indicates the current range to the spot under the reticle pipper. Inscribed outside the aiming reticle is the AG gun maximum range. When the current range line is less than the maximum range cue, the in range will be displayed, and you can fire the gun with great accuracy. Press spacebar to continue. Also on the AG gun HUD is a horizontal bar with what appears to be upturned wings on the end. This is the pull-up cue, and this is there to advise you of potential ground collision. It is not a weapon fragmentation warning. When the velocity vector is below the pull-up cue, the brake X will appear on the HUD. Along the right side of the HUD is your selected AG gun mode. In this case, CCIP and the selected weapon and number of rounds remaining. Okay, too much talk, not enough Bert. Let's try this out and then we'll talk about the manual mode. Press spacebar to unpause and kill some helpless trucks. Ahead of you at Waypoint 1 is a group of target trucks in the center of an abandoned airfield. The targets are also marked with a gate and red smoke, impossible to miss. As you get closer to the target group, descend on the target and place the CCIP gun pipper over one of the trucks and squeeze the trigger to fire the gun. Once you've destroyed one, we'll discuss manual mode.
Altitude. 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 Altitude.
Good job, Annie Oakley. When you're ready to talk about the AG gun in manual mode, level your wings and press spacebar. I've re-paused the mission so we can discuss AG gun in manual mode. If you are not already there, go back to the AG gun format page on the left DDI. Press spacebar when ready to continue. First, select manual mode by pressing push button 4 on the left DDI. Most of this will look the same from the CCIP mode, but we now have a UFC legend next to push button 14. Go ahead and press it. We will now enter a milliradians or mils setting for the fixed gun sight on the HUD. You can use a manual mil setting sight, much like a fixed World War II bombing sight, or what you find on older aircraft like the F-5E. On the top option select window, RTCL is displayed, short for reticle. Press the option select button to the left to select it. When selected, a colon will appear to the left of RTCL. Now use the UFC keypad to enter a mil value between 0 and 270 and press enter. Try 10. Upon doing so, the AG gun reticle and pipper will be adjusted to a fixed location on the HUD. The AG gun mode and mill setting will be displayed on the right side of the HUD, and the mill setting will appear to the right of the RTCL indication on the AG gun format page. Press spacebar when ready to unpause the lesson and try this out. Press escape when you are ready to end the lesson.
Altitude. Altitude. Pull up, pull up. Altitude. Altitude. Pull up, pull up. Altitude. 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 Pull up, pull up. Pull up, pull up.
Welcome to this training lesson on the use of the Hornet's M61A2 20mm cannon. Mounted on the nose of the aircraft, it can be loaded with up to 578 rounds and has a firing rate of either 4,000 or 6,000 rounds per minute. When too close for missiles, the gun is a great option in a dogfight. I currently have the lesson paused as we talk about the AA gun system. Press spacebar to continue. To start, let's first get the AA gun set up. The easiest way to do this is by simply pressing aft on the weapon select switch, or press left shift and X. Please do so now. With the AA gun selected, note that the master mode was automatically set to AA. The left DDI displays the AA gun format, the HUD is in the gun auto acquisition mode, and the right DDI is in the AA radar page with air combat maneuvering mode selected. Let's first take a closer look at the AA gun format page on the left DDI. Above the wing form, you see the number of gun rounds remaining, 578, and below that you see the state of the master arm switch. On the left side of the page, you have the gun round type selection of M50 or PGU-28. You want to make sure that this selection matches what you have loaded on the aircraft. Press the M50 push button to select M50 rounds. In the bottom of the left format are push buttons for high and low gun fire rate. Low fires the gun at 4,000 rounds per minute and high fires the gun at 6,000 rounds per minute. Select the high option. With no radar lock on the target, you will use the lead computing optical sight, also called the funnel. Simply put, with a wingspan entered, you will fly your Hornet to place the wingtips of the target's aircraft just touching the sides of the funnel. When they are, you have a good firing solution to hit the target. To enter the correct target wingspan, press the UFC push button. Our target aircraft will be a MiG-29 with a wingspan of approximately 37 feet. The top option select window is marked WSPN for wingspan. Press the option select button to the left. This will allow us to enter a target wingspan. On the UFC keypad, type in 37 and then press enter on the UFC keypad. Press spacebar when done. With that done, you will now note that the WSPN or wingspan indication in the top right portion of the AA gun format page displays 037 to the right. Now let's take a look at the HUD. Currently, you are in the gun auto acquisition mode. This is indicated by the large dashed circle on the HUD. Also note that the selected weapon, gun, indicated near the bottom center of the HUD, and the number of rounds remaining below it. To lock up a target, simply fly to place your target within 5 miles inside the dashed circle. Until you have a target locked though, you can use the gun funnel. In addition to the gun auto acquisition mode, you also have the bore sight BST, vertical VACQ, and wide WACQ air combat maneuvering ACM modes. But we will talk about those in a separate lesson. When you are ready, press spacebar and I will unpause the lesson. Ahead of you are 2 drone MiG-29s. Place them within the dashed circle on the HUD to lock one of them up. Upon doing so, you now have some new information on the HUD for a locked target. You have your VC closure, velocity and target range below it on the right side of the HUD. The locked target has a target designation box or diamond around it, and an aiming reticle with a pipper in the center. Along the outside of the aiming reticle is a line that indicates maximum gun range. Fly to place the pipper in the center of the aiming reticle over the target and pull the trigger when the target is within range. When the pipper is over the target and within range, a shoot cue will appear over the target. To unlock the target, press the undesignated button on your stick, or press S. Good job. Now splash the second drone. Splash 2. Great job using the AA gun. This is a great weapon in close and when Winchester on missiles. Press escape to end the lesson. In this lesson, we'll learn about how to use the AIM-9L and M versions of the venerable Sidewinder short-range infrared guided air-to-air missile. Using a cooled infrared seeker, the Sidewinder locks onto the hot elements of a target, most often the engines. Best used in close-range dogfights, the Sidewinder is a fire and forget after launch. However, the Sidewinder can be decoyed by flares and is less effective against ground clutter. Today we're looking at the L and M versions. The A-9L, or Lima, entered production in 1977 and was the first all-aspect homing Sidewinder, meaning it could get a lock on a target at any aspect angle. However, a rear aspect provides much better detection. The Mike, or AIM-9M, is an improved version of the Lima with better flare rejection and a reduced smoke motor. In a later lesson, we'll take a look at the AIM-9X and the joint helmet-mounted cueing system. The Sidewinder can be used on both bore sight mode and slaved to a radar-locked target. I currently have the lesson paused as we discuss some of its features. To select a Sidewinder, press down on the weapon select switch, or press left, shift, and S. Do this now. When selected with no target locked on radar, the Sidewinder will be in bore sight mode. This is indicated by the single reticle on the HUD that indicates the seeker line of sight. Below on the HUD, you will notice the name of the weapon, 9M in this case, and the number of missiles remaining to the right. To employ a Sidewinder in this mode, fly your Hornet to place the reticle over a target and wait for the seeker tone to change to a higher pitch. This indicates the seeker sees and is tracking the target. You could then launch the missile by pulling the trigger or pressing the spacebar. To allow the seeker to self-track the target, press the cage-uncage button on your throttle or press C when you hear the lock tone. Once self-tracking, the seeker will automatically follow the target within its seeker field of regard. Before trying this though, let's first take a closer look at the AIM-9 format page on the left DDI. Press spacebar to continue. As with the AA gun, you have the remaining gun rounds and master arm indications. Along the wing form are indications for AIM-9 loading. 9L indicates stations with AIM-9L, and 9M indicates stations with AIM-9M. The selected station includes an SEL for selected below it. To cycle through AIM-9 stations, press the AIM-9 select switch on the weapon select switch, or press left shift S. This allows you to switch between AIM-9L and AIM-9M versions. When you are ready, press spacebar and I will unpause the lesson. You now have two MiG-29 drone targets ahead of you. Fly to place the reticle over one of them until you hear a higher-pitched lock tone. You can either launch an AIM-9 now by pressing the trigger on the stick or spacebar on the keyboard, or initiate a self-track by pressing the cage-uncage button on the throttle, or pressing C. Once self-tracking, launch an AIM-9. It may take more than one to bring down the MiG. Splash 1. Keep an eye on the second MiG-29 and follow it. We will use a radar-slaved track for that one. Follow the second drone. To lock up the second drone on radar, press up on the sensor select switch or press right alt and semicolon. This will place the radar in air combat maneuvering or ACM mode. Keep following the second drone. When ACM mode is first selected, the bore sight auto acquisition mode is selected. This is indicated by the dashed circle on the HUD. To lock up the target, fly to place the target within the dashed circle and have the target under 10 miles away. Fly to keep the target at about 1 mile to keep the radar locked. On the HUD is a large, solid circle that acts as both the AIM-9 allowable steering error circle and as the normalized in-range display, or NERD circle. Fly to keep the small steering dot inside the circle to give the missile the best chance of reaching the target. Along the outside of the circle are two triangle NERD indications. The one at the 6 o'clock position is the missile maximum range, also called AMRAAMs, and the other is the missile minimum range, called RMIN. The line inscribing the circle indicates target range, and you want this between RMAX and RMIN to launch the missile. Also on the HUD is a box or diamond that indicates the line of sight to the locked target, and the smaller circle indicates the AIM-9 seeker line of sight. If you see a large X across the HUD and radar display, your range to the target is less than the minimum range indication. When the target is between RMAX and RMIN, the steering dot is inside the ASE circle and the weapon is armed. The shoot cue will appear and you can launch the missile by pulling the trigger on your stick. Nice job, you downed the second drone. Some final thoughts on using the AIM-9. First, the seeker can better track a target from behind than in front. Second, if the target is expending flares, it may decoy your missile. Third, the AIM-9 does not have a large warhead, so it may take more than one to bring down a target. Press escape to end the lesson. In this lesson, we'll explore employment of the Advanced Medium Range Air-to-Air Missile, or AMRAAM. The AMRAAM replaced the older AIM-7 Sparrow with improved range, guidance, weight, and an embedded radar seeker in the nose cone. This allows the AMRAAM to guide on target without support from the host aircraft as the missile closes with the target. This in turn allows the launch aircraft to maneuver without loss of missile guidance to the target. The AMRAAM can be cued to targets with the Hornet's radar, or it can be launched at a close range just using the missile's seeker. Deliveries of the AIM-120B began in 1994 and replaced the AIM-120A. The AIM-120C was fielded in 1996 and has clipped wings to support internal storage, improved target detection, and greater range. As with all air-to-air missiles, engagement range is highly dependent on engagement aspect, launch altitude, and launch speed. You will see much greater launch distances at 30,000 feet on a closing target than 5,000 feet on a receding target. I currently have the lesson paused. To select the AMRAAM, press right on the weapon select switch or press left shift and D. Do this now. Let's first take a look at the AMRAAM format page on the left DDI. In the top left corner of the DDI, at push button 6, is the size selection. By pressing on the push button, you have selections to set weapon fusing size to small, medium, and large sized targets. We'll be shooting down some drone MiG-29s, so select small. To the right of the size selection is the radar cross-section, or RCS selection. Upon pressing this push button, you have options to set the expected radar cross-section of the target between small, medium, and large. Go ahead and set it to small. Along the right side of the DDI at push button 13 is the step push button. Successive presses cycle the selected AIM-120 stations. You can see AIM-120 loading on the wing form with AB for AIM-120B and AC for AIM-120C. The selected rail stations include the SEL indicator and dual rail stations with indications for right and left rail on the station. Press spacebar to continue. When we selected the AIM-120, we also set the radar on the right DDI to the AIM-120 default settings. These include a range scale of 40 miles, a 2-bar scan, an azimuth of 140 degrees, and an interleaved PRF. Let's keep these as is. Press spacebar to continue. The large dashed circle is the most obvious indication of AMRAAM selection. This indicates the seeker field of view if launched with no radar lock first. This is termed Mad Dog launch, and the AMRAAM will lock on to intercept the first target it detects within the dashed reticle area out to 10 miles. Below the dashed reticle is the designation for the selected weapon, AB for AIM-120B and AC for AIM-120C. Below that is a visual indication, meaning there is no radar lock, and if launched now, the missile would be in Mad Dog mode. Press spacebar and I'll add some drone targets. On the right DDI radar page, we see a target, or called a hit, on the radar. Let's lock it up by moving the Throttle Designator Controller, or TDC, over it and locking it up. We do this by using the TDC switch on the throttle or by pressing period, comma, backslash, and semicolon to slew it. Once the two vertical bars of the TDC are over the hit, press down on the TDC switch or press the enter button. Once the target is locked, press spacebar to continue. With the target locked up, some new information is now available on the HUD. On the HUD is a large, solid circle that acts as both the AIM-120 allowable steering error circle and as the normalized in-range display or NERD circle. Fly to keep the small steering dot inside the circle to give the missile the best chance of reaching the target. Along the outside of the circle are 3 triangle NERD indications. The one at 6 o'clock position is the missile maximum range, also called RMAX. Counterclockwise from it is the no escape range, also called RNE. When target range is within RNE, the target could change course and the missile would still have the energy to reach the target. The third indication, near the 2 o'clock position of the NERD circle, is the missile minimum range, called RMIN. The line inscribing the circle indicates target range, and you want this between RMAX and RMIN to launch the missile. Also on the HUD is a box or diamond that indicates the line of sight to the locked target. A box indicates a friendly target, and a diamond indicates it as a hostile. If you see a large X across the HUD and radar display, your range to the target is less than the minimum range indication. When the target is between RMAX and RMIN, the steering dot is inside the ASE circle and weapon is armed, the shoot cue will appear and you can launch the missile by pulling the trigger on the stick or by pressing the spacebar. When between RNE and RMIN, the shoot indication will flash. Press spacebar to continue. Along the right side of the HUD are 3 lines of information. The top line is an indication of closure velocity, V sub c, and below that is target range in miles. Further down on the right side of the HUD is the timer field. When the locked target is outside the range of the AIM-120 radar seeker, the value will display the time from missile launch at which the AMRAAM seeker will turn on and hunt down the target. This is shown as the time in seconds and then ACT. Once the range of the seeker in the AMRAAM is less than approximately 10 miles, the time changes to time to go until the missile impacts the target. This is displayed as remaining time and then TTG. The ACT and TTG will be in reference to the last AIM-120 launched. When the target range is 15 miles, launch an AMRAAM by pressing and holding the trigger. If the first does not succeed, try again. Splash 1. Go ahead and lock up the target flying towards you and press spacebar. Don't engage it. If you don't see one on the radar, press the up arrow on the radar to increase its display range. Take a look at the air-to-air radar format on the right DDI. You'll note that much of the information on the HUD is duplicated there and includes an ASC circle, shoot cue, steering dot, and range indication as along the azimuth steering line to the target. The locked target has the antenna azimuth line running through it and has its speed as Mach to the left and its altitude to the right. The Rmax, Rne, and Rmin are displayed along the antenna azimuth line. When the AMRAAM is launched, a triangular fly-out symbol appears on the azimuth steering line and travels to the target. Once the missile seeker is active, an A appears below the fly-out symbol. To break a lock, press the undesignated button on the stick or press S. Press spacebar to continue. As noted earlier, you can also use the AMRAAM with no radar lock. Termed visual mode, simply fly to place a target within 10 miles inside the HUD reticle and launch the missile. The AMRAAM will go after the first target it detects, hostile or friendly. Practice using the AIM-120 against the remaining drones and press escape when you wish to end the lesson. In this lesson, we'll take a look at the use of unguided rockets. Like the air-to-ground gun, it is a simple point-and-shoot weapon system against unarmed and lightly armed targets. It's an area effect weapon and not designed for precision attack. As such, it's often used in a ripple fire mode in which all rockets in the pod fire at once. However, you can also fire one rocket at a time. We have both 2.75-inch rockets loaded on our inboard stations in 19-rocket Lao-68 pods and 5-inch Zuni rockets on the outboard stations in 4-rocket Lao-10 pods. From the mission editor, the inboard rocket stations are hardwired for ripple fire mode and the outboard stations are set to single fire mode. First, select AG Master Mode. On the left DDI, under the top row of push buttons, are selections for 10S and 68R. 10S indicates Lao-10 with Zuni rockets set to single fire mode, and 68R indicates Lao-68 with 2.5-inch rockets set to ripple fire mode. Select 10S at push button 6. We are now looking at the rocket's format page on the left DDI. On this page we can select the rocket delivery mode, launch type selection, hot gun, and UFC entry for manual mode. Along the left side of the page, we see that we have mode options of continuously computed impact point or CCIP and manual or man mode. CCIP is boxed, indicated it is the active mode. We'll come back to these soon. Below the mode selection on push buttons 2 and 3 are selections for either single or salvo. When single is selected, rockets will just be launched from the selected rocket pod. A selected pod is indicated as boxed on the wing form. When salvo is selected, all rocket pods of the selected type will fire their rockets. Note that either one rocket per pod or all rockets per pod will be launched based on the single and ripple fire selections in the mission editor. In the top right of the page at push button 11 is the selection for hot gun. When selected, gun is boxed with a ready indication to the left. In hot gun mode, pulling the trigger will fire the gun with the gun cross on the HUD acting as your bore sight aiming reference. Below the hot gun selection is the step option at push button 13. Successive presses of step cycles through the selected rocket pod of the selected type when in single mode. One final note on the rocket format page, a diamond symbol under the wing form indicates an adapter to carry more than one weapon on the station. Press spacebar to continue. Let's look at the HUD now, which is in rocket CCIP mode. The most important element of the rocket HUD is the CCIP gun reticle near the center of the HUD. When showing valid range, it acts as a dot of destruction and mayhem. Fly to place the pipper over a target and press the weapon release button, or press enter when the in-range cue is displayed to rain your fury on the target. Around the center pipper dot is a 50mm reticle composed of tick marks, each representing 1,000 feet of slant range. As you get closer to the target, a range tape will unwind counterclockwise around the reticle from 23,000 feet to 0 feet. Inscribed inside the reticle will be a line that indicates the current range to the spot under the reticle pipper. Inscribed outside the aiming reticle is the rocket maximum range indication line. When the current range line is less than the maximum range line, in RNG will be displayed on the HUD and you can fire rockets with accuracy. Press spacebar to continue. Also on the rocket HUD is a horizontal bar with what appears to be upturned wings on the end. This is the pull-up cue, and this is there to advise you of potential ground collision. It is not a weapon fragmentation warning. When the velocity vector is below the pull-up cue, the brake X will appear on the HUD. The rocket element is located on the right side of the HUD and indicates our selected mode, CCIP, and the number of rockets remaining, in this case, 22. Near the top center of the HUD is the bore sight line of the M61A2 gun, and this is your gun cross for hot gun mode. Press spacebar to unpause and kill some helpless trucks. Ahead of you at waypoint 1 are groups of target trucks at an abandoned airfield. The targets are also marked with a gate and red smoke. As you get closer to the target group, Descend on the target and place the CCIP rocket pipper over one of the truck groups and press the weapon release button, or press right Alt and spacebar to fire rockets. If you have hot gun enabled, you can also fire the gun with the trigger or spacebar. Once you've destroyed the truck, we'll discuss manual mode.
Altitude. Altitude.
Good job, Carlos Hathcock. When you're ready to talk about using rockets in manual mode, level your wings and press spacebar.
Altitude. Altitude. Pull up, pull up. Altitude. Altitude. Pull up, pull up. Altitude. Altitude. Pull up, pull up.